Well, I'd like to begin this discussion on the importance of beauty for evangelisation by quoting an Irish Dominican called Vincent McNab. Father McNab wrote, "Into the great temple of truth, the Church of God, there are two gates, the gate of wisdom and the gate of beauty." He said, "I'm inclined to think that the narrower gate is the gate of wisdom, while the wider gate, the one through which millions pass, is the gate of beauty." The Catholic Church has these portals ever open. She welcomes from time to time the few philosophers and thinkers, but she welcomes unceasingly the countless numbers who come for her colour, her song, and her smile. I believe that the way of beauty is the wider way. Father McNab also suggested that beauty is the radiance of truth and the fragrance of goodness. The idea that evangelization requires us to give people an experience of beauty and goodness along with truth is standard Catholic thinking, and in our own time it has been showcased in Bishop Barron's Word on Fire ministries and in many other communities that take to heart the idea that we need to keep truth, beauty, and goodness working together in a Trinitarian harmony. Some people, the more intellectual types, often find their way to the church through the gate of truth. But as Father McNab noted, the wider, more accessible gate is the gate of beauty. Even an intellectual like Pope Benedict thought that beauty was extremely important for leading people to God. He stated that the only really effective apologia for Christianity comes down to two arguments, namely the saints the Church has produced and the art which has grown in her womb. He declared that for faith to grow today, we must lead ourselves and the persons we meet to encounter the saints and to come into contact with the beautiful. This is not a novel position in the Catholic tradition, but follows a long line of authorities who have regarded the aesthetic moment as essentially theophanic, that is to say, revealing something of the nature of God. Leading Catholic saints who emphasize the evangelical power of beauty include St. Augustine, St. Bonaventure, and St. John Henry Newman, and all three are regarded as church doctors, that is, saints whose contribution to the life of the church is foremost in the field of theology. Catholic theologians tend to follow the Greek philosopher Plato in holding that the beautiful and the good, ultimately the beautiful and God, coincide. As Pope Benedict remarked, through the appearance of the beautiful, we are wounded in our innermost being, and that wound grips us and takes us beyond ourselves. It stirs longing into flight and moves us toward the truly beautiful, to the good in itself, that is, to God. Of course, the God of Christianity is not the same as Plato's conception, but Plato, one might say, was on the right path in his understanding of the connection between beauty and truth and the divine. When Pope Benedict spoke of a wound in our innermost being, he was referring to the fact that an experience of beauty creates in us a desire for the transcendent, for the eternal, for something beyond us. We become aware of our own limitations and our need for an experience of something that is much greater than ourselves. The philosopher Eleonore Stump explained it in this way. She said, "When we are in the grip of that Augustinian sort of desire, we often do not know what we're yearning for. But Augustine thought that if both the beauty and the desire is for real, then in effect the desire is a desire that will lead us to God. If the desire for that beauty grows in a person, it will end bringing a person to surrender to God in faith, in the process which culminates in the human's will being united to the goodness of God's will. As Saint Augustine famously prayed, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you." A concrete example of the beauty that has been created by the Church can be found in the numerous Gothic cathedrals scattered throughout the world, especially in Europe. The famous medieval abbot of Saint Denis in Paris, Abbot Suger, who is often credited with being the person who began the whole Gothic architecture movement, said this of his experience of praying in his abbey. He said, "When out of my delight in the beauty of the house of God, the loveliness of the many-coloured gems in the rose windows call me away from my external cares and toward prayer, then it seems to me that I see myself dwelling in some strange region of the universe, which neither exists entirely in the slime of the earth, nor entirely in the purity of heaven, but somewhere between the two." Pope Benedict made a similar observation. He said, "The windows of the Gothic cathedrals keep out the garishness of the light outside, while concentrating that light and using it so that the whole history of God in relation to man, from creation to the second coming, shines through. The walls of the church, in interplay with the sun, become an image in their own right, the iconostasis of the West, lending at the place a sense of the sacred that can touch the hearts even of agnostics." The popular philosopher Alain de Botton, who comes from a Jewish family, wrote a very interesting article comparing the McDonald's restaurant to Westminster Cathedral. The restaurant in London is actually opposite Westminster Cathedral. And he said that the McDonald's restaurant's true talent lay in generating anxiety. The harsh lighting, the intermittent sounds of frozen fries being sunk into vats of oil, and the frenzied behaviour of the counter staff invited thoughts of the loneliness and meaninglessness of existence in a random and violent universe. But conversely, he said, after 10 minutes in Westminster Cathedral, a range of ideas that would have been inconceivable outside began to assume an air of reasonableness. He said that under the influence of the marble, the darkness and the incense, it seemed entirely probable that Jesus was the Son of God and that he had walked across the Sea of Galilee. In the presence of alabaster statues of the Virgin Mary set against rhythms of red, green and blue marble, it was no longer surprising to think that an angel might at any moment choose to descend through the layers of dense London cloud, enter through a window in the nave, blow a golden trumpet and make an announcement in Latin about a forthcoming celestial event. Gothic architecture is not, of course, the only example of beautiful Christian art. There are icons, great paintings, polyphonic music, Gregorian chant, splendid liturgies, great poetry, and other literature. There are also beautiful families and the beauty in the lives of the saints. Pope Benedict said that the greatness of Western music, from Gregorian chant to polyphony to the Baroque age, to the music of Anton Bruckner, which he especially liked, was for him the most immediate and the most evident verification that history has to offer of the Christian image of mankind and of the Christian dogma of redemption. My own earliest encounter with the beauty of Christian art was a visit to a convent when I was around 4 years old. The convent was built in the Spanish mission style, with gardens surrounded by cloisters. Oil paintings of saints hung on the walls of the corridors. A piano took pride of place in a parlour where guests were received by the nuns. As a souvenir of my visit, the Mother Superior gave me a book of prayers for children, and on the cover of the book there was a picture of 2 children walking across a broken bridge, with their guardian angels escorting them. I was also given a little brooch in the shape of a flower. I have no idea of how the Mother Superior came by that, but I treasured it for years. The convent was another world from my suburban home. Even the convent cats had extraordinary names. The bluish-grey Persian male was called Thomas Aquinas, not simply Thomas, but Thomas Aquinas, and the brindle-coloured female was Juliette Marie. Quite simply, I left that convent utterly enchanted. More recently, I attended the Requiem Mass for Bishop Peter Elliott, who was, among other things, a liturgist. He had left very detailed instructions about his funeral. He described the kinds of vestments he wanted to be worn, and even the brand of church candles that were to be used. We had a hymn written by St. John Henry Newman, and the music from Gabriel Fauré's famous Requiem. The casket was draped with a pall featuring an embroidered Jerusalem cross. Scores of priests solemnly processed into their seats. Those concelebrating within the sanctuary included a number of bishops and at least 3 archbishops. Knights of the Holy Sepulchre dressed in their full regalia carried the casket to the waiting hearse, and knights and dames of the Order of the Holy Sepulchre formed a guard of honour along the street outside the cathedral. Nothing was slipshod. Every single moment was ordered and solemn, and it took the entire people of God, from the archbishops to the most lowly person in the pews, to bring it all together. Bishop Peter Elliott was a convert from High Church Anglicanism, and the High Church Anglicans are renowned for their appreciation of beauty. Calvinists, however, are famous for their austerity and indeed for their fear of beauty. There is a great line from the German writer Gerhard Niebel. He said, "Anyone enamored of beauty will shiver in the barn of the Reformation and feel the pull of Rome." Bishop Peter Elliott entered the Catholic Church when he was a student in Oxford, and thus never risked shivering in the barn of some Calvinist church. Finally, one of my favourite books is Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited. In it there is a passage in which the agnostic Charles Ryder says to the Catholic Sebastian Flight, "My dear Sebastian, you can't seriously believe it all. I mean about Christmas and the star and the 3 kings and the ox and the ass." But Sebastian replies, "Oh yes, I believe that. It's a lovely idea." Then Charles replies, "But you can't believe things because they're lovely ideas." But Sebastian insists, "But I do. That's how I believe." Charles, of course, eventually became a Catholic and was one of those who entered through the gate of beauty.